The applause started before the words even fully settled in the air. It wasn't loud at first, just a few hesitant claps, scattered like raindrops before a storm. Then it grew, stronger, bolder. And then her sons stood up, clapping, smiling. Evelyn Carter didn't move. Not when her husband dropped the words like a knife into the room. "I'm filing for divorce." Not when the whispers exploded across the grand ballroom. Not even when her own children applauded him. She simply sat there, her fingers resting lightly on the gold ring that had lived on her hand for 50 years. Tonight, it felt heavier than it ever had, like a chain. The Carter estate glittered under crystal chandeliers, dripping in white orchids and candlelight. The ocean breeze slipped through the open terrace doors, carrying the scent of salt and luxury. To everyone else, it was perfection. To Evelyn, it smelled like a grave. She lifted her eyes slowly. The entire elite of Savannah had gathered. Business moguls, politicians, socialites, all of them raising glasses moments ago, celebrating a marriage that had stood the test of time. 50 years. What a lie. Her gaze shifted to her husband. Richard Carter stood at the head of the table, tall, composed, his silver hair perfectly styled. At 72, he looked powerful, untouchable. He held the microphone like he owned not just the room, but everyone inside it. "I've given everything to this marriage," he had said. Evelyn almost smiled at that. Everything. Yes, he had given everything, except love. Her eyes moved to the right. Her sons, Daniel and Marcus, 46 and 44, successful, polished, cold, just like him. Daniel raised his glass toward his father. "Finally," he said with a grin. "Took you long enough, Dad." Marcus chuckled. "Took you long enough, Dad." Something inside Evelyn shifted. Not cracked, not broke, shifted, like a lock turning after decades. For a moment, the room blurred, and memory dragged her back. A shattered vase, a 3-year-old boy crying, a slap across her face, and her silence. Always her silence. "I thought I was protecting them," she realized, but she hadn't. She had raised them to believe power was everything, and kindness was weakness. The applause faded into uneasy murmurs. Evelyn inhaled slowly. Then she stood. Her chair scraped against the marble floor, the sound sharp enough to slice through the noise. Heads turned. All of them. She could feel their eyes, their curiosity, their hunger for drama. Richard sighed under his breath. "Don't embarrass yourself, Evelyn." She didn't look at him. Instead, she reached up and slid the ring off her finger. It came free easier than expected, as if it had been waiting for this moment. She placed it gently on the table. The soft clink echoed like a gunshot. Silence. Complete. Even the musicians stopped. Richard frowned. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Evelyn lifted her head. For the first time in 50 years, her eyes held no fear. "Clap louder," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, sharp. "Go on. You should be proud." Daniel's smile faded. Marcus straightened slightly. Something wasn't right. "Clap louder, boys," Evelyn repeated, her gaze locking onto theirs. Then she dropped the truth. "But you should know." A pause. Heavy. Deadly. "Your real father is sitting at the next table." The world stopped. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the ocean seemed to go silent. Daniel's face drained of color. "What?" Marcus let out a shaky laugh. "Mom, what the hell are you talking about?" Richard didn't laugh. He turned slowly, following her gaze. across the room, toward the shadowed corner where the least important guests had been seated. And then, a chair moved. A man stood up. Not rich, not polished, not powerful, but steady, unshaken. He stepped forward into the light, and in that moment, everything began to fall apart. The man didn't rush. He didn't hesitate either. He simply walked forward, step by step, like someone who had already waited a lifetime and had no reason to hurry anymore. The crowd parted without being asked. Something about him demanded space. Not power, not wealth, something else, something heavier. Evelyn didn't move as he approached. Her heart was beating, but not with fear, with certainty. Daniel let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. This is a joke, right? He looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to laugh with him. No one did. Marcus stepped forward, his voice rising. "Mom, say something. Tell me this is some kind of sick prank." Evelyn's eyes stayed calm, steady. "No," she said quietly. "It's the truth." The man reached the table. He stopped beside her, not touching, just standing there, like he belonged. Richard's face had gone pale, but not with shock, with recognition. "You," he whispered, his voice suddenly hoarse. The man finally looked at him. There was no anger in his eyes, no triumph, just a quiet, worn-out sadness. "Yes," he said simply, a single word, and yet it hit harder than anything else that night. Daniel's breathing grew heavier. His eyes darted between the two men. "What is going on? Who is this?" Evelyn turned to him slowly. "This," she said, her voice firm now, "is Thomas Reed." The name meant nothing to the guests, but it meant everything to Richard. His jaw tightened. "But gardener," he muttered under his breath. A ripple of confusion spread through the room. "The gardener," someone whispered. Marcus stared at Thomas like he was seeing something impossible. "That's not funny. You expect us to believe that this man is our father?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at them closely, really looked. And for the first time, she saw it clearly. The same eyes, the same jawline, the same quiet intensity buried under layers of arrogance. "Look at him," she said softly. Daniel scoffed. "I don't need to see. Look!" Her voice cracked like a whip. Silence slammed into the room again. Reluctantly, Daniel turned. Marcus followed, and for a brief moment, everything aligned. The resemblance, unmistakable, unavoidable. Daniel's face went rigid. Marcus took a step back. "No," he whispered. "It's not possible." Thomas didn't move, didn't defend himself, didn't argue. He just stood there, meeting their eyes, calm, patient, like he had done this 1,000 times in his mind before this moment. Richard suddenly laughed, loud, harsh, almost relieved. "Well," he said, clapping his hands slowly once, mockingly. "Finally." Everyone turned to him. Evelyn frowned. That wasn't the reaction she expected. "Finally the truth comes out," Richard continued, pouring himself a drink like this was just another business deal. "Took you long enough, Evelyn." Daniel blinked. "Wait, what?" Marcus looked at his father. "What do you mean?" Richard took a sip, completely unbothered. "I mean," he said casually, "I've known for 50 years. The words didn't just shock the room, they shattered it. Evelyn felt the ground shift beneath her. "You knew?" she whispered. Richard smirked. "Of course I knew," he said. "Did you really think I was that stupid?" He gestured lazily toward Daniel and Marcus. "In my family, every child is born with gray eyes. It's a tradition." He paused, letting that sink in. "And then, suddenly, I have 2 sons with amber eyes." His gaze flicked to Thomas. "You do the math." Daniel staggered back slightly. Marcus's voice shook. "Then why? Why would you—" "Raise you?" Richard finished for him. "Give you my name?" He shrugged. "Because it benefited me." Silence. Heavy. Ugly. "Your grandfather paid a fortune for that marriage. I needed the money. Simple as that." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly.
Every sacrifice, every lie, all of it, meaningless. And later, Marcus demanded, his voice breaking, all these years, why keep pretending? Richard smiled faintly. Because it worked. A perfect family, a powerful image. Investors love stability. Daniel looked like he was about to be sick. So we were just, what, props? Assets, Richard corrected. The word landed like a slap. Evelyn turned toward Thomas. He hadn't reacted. Not to the insults, not to the truth. He just stood there, watching them all fall apart. I tried to stop her, Thomas said quietly, his voice rough but steady. A long time ago. Evelyn's chest tightened. Rain, a trembling choice. I told her we could leave, start over, but she was scared. I was, Evelyn said softly. Her voice didn't shake, not anymore. I was afraid of losing everything, status, security, approval. She looked at her sons. And I told myself I was doing it for you. Daniel's eyes filled with something darker than anger. Betrayal. You lied to us, he said. Yes, she answered. No excuses, no denial, just truth. Marcus let out a hollow laugh. So what now? He asked. We just accept this? That everything we are is fake? Evelyn stepped forward. No, she said firmly. Now you decide who you are without the lie. Daniel shook his head violently. No, this isn't happening. His gaze snapped to Thomas. Rage ignited. You, he pointed a trembling finger. You did this. And before anyone could react, he lunged. His fist flew forward, straight toward Thomas's face. Gasps filled the room. Evelyn moved instinctively, but she was too far, too slow. Thomas didn't move, not an inch. He didn't even raise his hands. He just looked at him, straight into his eyes. And Daniel, his fist stopped, in midair, frozen, an inch away, because in that moment he saw it, himself.
Daniel's fist trembled in the air, just an inch away from impact. 1 second, 2, and then it dropped, like all the strength had suddenly drained out of his body. He stumbled back, shaking his head, his breathing uneven. No, this isn't real, he muttered. This can't be real. Marcus grabbed his arm. Daniel! Don't touch me! Daniel snapped, jerking away violently. His eyes were still locked on Thomas, on that face, that reflection. I see it, he whispered, his voice breaking. I see it, damn it, I see it. Silence wrapped around the room like a suffocating blanket. No one dared to speak, because everyone saw it too. The resemblance was no longer a possibility. It was a fact. Marcus took a step forward, slower this time. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was hollow. So, what does that make us? He asked quietly. No one answered, because everyone already knew, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Richard chuckled, low, cruel. Oh, don't be so dramatic, he said, swirling the drink in his glass. You're still the same men you were 10 minutes ago. Marcus turned to him, his expression twisting. No, he said, we're not. Richard raised an eyebrow. Really? Because I still see 2 grown men standing in expensive suits, living off a name they didn't earn. The words hit harder than any punch. Daniel snapped his head toward him. You don't get to say that, he growled. Oh, I absolutely do, Richard shot back. I built everything you've ever had. And it was all a lie, Marcus shouted. Richard shrugged. Welcome to the real world. Evelyn stepped forward. Enough. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything, sharp, final. All eyes turned to her. She looked at her summons, not with anger this time, but with something far heavier. Truth. You're not nothing, she said slowly, but you're not what you thought you were either. Daniel let out a bitter laugh.
That's supposed to make us feel better? No, Evelyn said. It's supposed to make you wake up. Marcus shook his head. You destroyed us, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Do you even understand that? Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. I destroyed a lie, Evelyn replied, and without it, what are we? Marcus fired back. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at Thomas, then back at her sons. That, she said quietly, is something you should have figured out a long time ago. Daniel's jaw tightened. You don't get to act like you're better than us. I don't, Evelyn said. I'm the one who created this. That stopped him. For a moment. I stayed silent, she continued. Every time your father insulted someone, every time you disrespected people, every time you became more like him, she looked at Richard, and less like yourself. Richard rolled his eyes. Oh, please, spare us the moral speech. Evelyn ignored him. I thought you would grow out of it. I thought if I just kept the peace, things would fix themselves. She let out a quiet breath. I was wrong. The words hung heavy. Marcus looked away. Daniel clenched his fists, but neither of them argued, because deep down, they knew. Richard finished his drink and set the glass down with a sharp clink. Are we done with this emotional circus? Because I still have paperwork to sign. Evelyn turned to him, and something in her eyes changed again. Colder, sharper. You're right, she said. Let's finish it. Relief flashed across Richard's face. Finally. He gestured toward the entrance. Bernard should be here any minute with the documents. We'll settle this quickly. Settle? Evelyn repeated softly. Richard smirked. Yes, you sign the agreement, you walk out quietly, and we all move on. Daniel frowned. What agreement? Richard didn't look at him. The one where your mother leaves with nothing. The room went still again. Marcus blinked. Nothing? Of course nothing, Richard said casually. She has no claim to my assets. Evelyn let out a small laugh. Not loud, not dramatic, but enough to make Richard pause. What's funny? He asked. Evelyn stepped closer, slow, deliberate. You really think I'm the one leaving with nothing? She asked. Richard's smile faded slightly. What do you mean? Evelyn tilted her head. Do you remember 1974? Richard frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Answer the question. Yes. Do you remember who insisted on the prenup? Richard's expression tightened. My father, he said. Evelyn nodded. And do you remember why? He didn't answer this time, because now he understood where this was going. Evelyn's voice remained calm. He was afraid, she said, that a poor girl like me would take your money. Richard's jaw clenched, so he made sure everything stayed separate. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Evelyn took another step closer. The house, she said quietly, the estate, all of it, was registered in my name. Richard froze. Daniel looked between them. Wait, what? Marcus frowned. That's not possible. Evelyn didn't break eye contact with Richard. It was a gift from my father, she continued, before the wedding. Richard's face had gone completely pale now. You're lying, he said. Am I? Right on cue, the doors opened. A man stepped inside, holding a folder. Mr. Carter, he said nervously, I have the documents. Perfect timing, Richard snapped, though his voice wasn't as confident anymore. Come here. The lawyer hesitated, because the tension in the room was unbearable. Evelyn turned her head slightly. Go on, she said calmly. Tell him. The lawyer swallowed, opened the folder, and looked directly at Richard. According to the prenuptial agreement, he began carefully, the estate legally belongs to Mrs. Carter. Silence. Absolute. Richard didn't move, didn't blink. "What?" he whispered. Evelyn finally smiled. Not sweet, not kind, but cold. Final. "You wanted freedom, Richard," she said. "Now you can have it."
For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. Richard Carter stood frozen, his fingers tightening slowly around the edge of the table. "That's not possible," he said again, louder this time. The lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "It is, sir. The documents are very clear. The estate, the land, the house, everything tied to the original property deed is legally under Mrs. Carter's name." Daniel stepped forward. "What about the company, the accounts?" The lawyer hesitated. "Those are Mr. Carter's, but the estate itself does not belong to him." Marcus stared at his father. "You knew about this?" Richard didn't answer. Because he did. Of course he did. But like everything else in his life, he had assumed control would always stay in his hands. Evelyn watched him quietly. For the first time in 50 years, he looked small, not powerful, not untouchable, just old. "You hid behind me," she said softly, "all these years." Richard snapped out of his shock. "Don't twist this," he barked. "That house exists because of me. I maintained it. I built everything around it." "And yet," Evelyn replied calmly, "it was never yours." That landed hard. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "So, what does this mean?" he asked, his voice tight. Evelyn turned to him. "It means," she said, "that I decide who stays." Marcus's eyes widened. "You're not serious." Evelyn didn't blink. "I am." A heavy silence followed. Richard let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You wouldn't dare." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "Wouldn't I?" Something in her tone made even him hesitate. "You've depended on me your entire life," he snapped. "You wouldn't survive a month without this family." Evelyn's lips curved into a faint smile. "You still don't understand," she said. "I don't need this family anymore." That sentence was the real breaking point. Daniel stepped closer, panic creeping into his voice. "Mom, please, let's think about this logically." "Logically?" Evelyn repeated. "Yes," he said quickly. "This doesn't have to get ugly. We can work something out. You don't need to make a scene like this." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Then she gently removed his hand from her arm. "You're not trying to fix anything. You're trying to protect yourself." Daniel flinched. Marcus stepped in. "And what's wrong with that?" he snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done tonight?" "Yes," Evelyn said calmly. "I told the truth." "Truth?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "You destroyed us." "No," Evelyn replied. "I revealed what was already broken." That shut him up. For a second. But not for long. "Do you think anyone will respect us after this?" Marcus continued, his voice rising. "Our partners, our clients, this will ruin everything." Evelyn's expression didn't change. "Then maybe," she said quietly, "you should build something that doesn't depend on a lie." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "You don't get it. You really don't get it." "No," Evelyn said. "I finally do." Richard slammed his hand against the table. "Enough," he roared. "I will not stand here and be humiliated in my own house." Evelyn's eyes met his, cold, unmoving. "This is not your house." Silence. Again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was realization. Richard's breathing grew heavier. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice lower now. "Dangerous." "So did I," she said, "for 50 years. The weight of those words pressed down on everyone in the room. Then she straightened her shoulders and delivered the final blow. "You have 1 hour." Richard blinked. "What?" "1 hour to pack your things." Daniel froze. "Mom," Marcus stepped forward, "you can't be serious." Evelyn didn't even look at them this time. "All of you," she continued. "You, Richard,
And then she shifted her gaze to her sons. "And you." Daniel's voice cracked. "You're kicking us out?" Evelyn nodded once. "Yes." Marcus let out a disbelieving laugh. "This is insane." "No," Evelyn said. "This is long overdue." Richard stepped closer, his face twisted with anger. "You think you can just throw me out like this after everything I've done for you?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "You already threw me out," she said quietly. "Tonight, in front of everyone." That hit deeper than anything else. For the first time, Richard had no response. The room fell silent again. But this silence felt different. It felt final. Daniel looked between his parents, his expression torn between rage and desperation. "Mom, please," he said softer now, "let's not do this like this." Evelyn finally looked at him again, and for a brief second, there was something in her eyes. Not anger, not coldness, something else. Grief. But it vanished just as quickly. "You already chose your side," she said. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it, because he knew. He had. Marcus clenched his fists. "Fine," he snapped. "You want to play this game? Don't expect us to just walk away quietly." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "What exactly do you think you can do?" Marcus didn't answer, because deep down, he didn't know. Richard exhaled slowly, trying to regain control. "This isn't over," he said. Evelyn gave a small nod. "You're right," she said. "It's not." She turned slightly, her gaze shifting past them, towards the man who had remained silent through it all. Thomas, still standing there, still calm, still steady. And for the first time that night, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Not fear, not anger. Support. She looked back at Richard. "You wanted a new life," she said. "Now go live it." For a moment, no one moved. The command had been given, the verdict delivered, and yet Richard Carter didn't leave. Instead, he stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like a man approaching a wild animal he wasn't sure he could still control. "Evelyn," he said, and something in his voice had changed. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't authority. It was calculation. "We shouldn't do this here," he added quietly, "not in front of everyone." Evelyn studied him. For 50 years, she had known every version of this man, the charming one, the cruel one, the manipulative one, and now, this one, the desperate one. "Say what you need to say," she replied calmly. Richard glanced around at the remaining guests, the staff lingering at the edges, the tension hanging thick in the air. His jaw tightened. "Privately," he insisted. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her head slightly toward Thomas. He hadn't moved, but when their eyes met, he gave a small, almost invisible nod. "Go. I'm here." Evelyn inhaled slowly, then looked back at Richard. "Fine," she said. She turned and walked toward the hallway leading to the study. Not behind him, not beside him, ahead. And for the first time, Richard followed. The study door closed with a heavy thud. The noise from the ballroom faded instantly, replaced by silence thick with history. This room had always belonged to him. Dark wood, leather chairs, the scent of cigars and control. But tonight, it felt different. Evelyn walked to the window and stood there, her back to him. She didn't sit, didn't offer him anything, didn't play her role anymore. Richard exhaled sharply. "You've made your point," he said. "Congratulations." Evelyn said nothing. He stepped closer. "You embarrassed me," he continued, his tone sharpening, in front of everyone. Evelyn turned her head slightly. "And you humiliated me," she said. Richard scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. I made an announcement." "You made a spectacle," she corrected. Silence. He looked away for a moment, then back at her. "Fine," he said. "Let's call it even." Evelyn almost smiled. "Even?" she repeated softly. You destroy my reputation, I expose your secret. Now we move on. She turned fully this time. And what exactly do you think moving on looks like? Richard spread his hands slightly. We settle this quietly. You keep the house. Fine. I don't fight you on it. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. That's generous of you, she said dryly. He ignored the tone. In return, he continued, you don't take this any further. No more scandals, no more surprises. Evelyn watched him carefully. And the divorce? She asked. It happens. Clean. Controlled. He took another step closer. And we both walk away with dignity. That word, dignity, hung in the air like a bad joke. Evelyn let out a quiet breath. You're still trying to manage this like a business deal. Because that's what it is, Richard snapped. Everything is. Evelyn shook her head slowly. No, she said, that's what you made it. He studied her face. Something in his expression shifted again. Listen to me, he said, softer now. 50 years, Evelyn. You don't just throw that away. Evelyn's eyes didn't soften. I didn't, she said. You did. That hit him, harder than he expected. I gave you everything, he shot back. You gave me a cage, she replied. And you stayed, he said quickly. Yes, she admitted. No hesitation. I stayed, she repeated. I stayed because I was afraid. Richard seized on that. Exactly, he said, and nothing has changed. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. Everything has changed. He stepped even closer now, close enough that she could see the cracks in his composure. Do you think you can survive out there alone? He asked quietly. At your age? Evelyn didn't step back. I'd rather be alone, she said, than spend one more day pretending this is a life. Richard's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. No, she said. I'm correcting one. Silence fell again, but this time it felt heavier, more dangerous. Richard's next move was different, unexpected. His shoulders dropped slightly, his voice lowered. Evelyn, he said, and for the first time that night, he sounded almost human. Let's fix this, he said quietly. Evelyn frowned. What fix? Us, he replied. She stared at him, not shocked, not confused, just empty. You don't mean that, she said. I do, he insisted. I'll end things with her. I'll make this right. Evelyn let out a soft, almost sad laugh. You don't even know what right means. I can learn, he shot back quickly. She shook her head. No, she said. You can't. That was it. That was the moment something in him snapped again. The softness vanished, replaced by something darker, colder. Fine, he said sharply. Have your way. He straightened his jacket. Do you think you've won? He added. Evelyn didn't respond. You haven't, he continued. You've just started a war. Evelyn's expression didn't change. Then it's a war I should have started 50 years ago. Richard stared at her for a long second. Then he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Be careful, he said quietly. You might not like what comes next. Evelyn met his gaze, unshaken. I already don't, she replied. Another silence. Then the door burst open. Daniel and Marcus stood there, breathing hard, faces tense. Dad, Daniel said urgently, we need to talk, now. Richard didn't look away from Evelyn, but he knew something had shifted outside, something bigger, more dangerous. Marcus stepped forward. His voice was low, uneasy. There's a problem. Evelyn watched them closely, because whatever it was, it had shaken them, and that meant this wasn't over. Not even close.
There's a problem. Marcus's voice carried something new. Not arrogance, not anger. Fear. Real fear. Richard's expression hardened instantly. What now? He snapped, clearly irritated that his control had been interrupted again. Daniel stepped inside the study, shutting the door behind him like he was sealing something dangerous out or in. It's not something we can ignore, he said, running a hand through his hair. Evelyn didn't move from her place near the window, but she was watching them closely, carefully. "What is it?" Richard demanded. Marcus hesitated for a second. That alone was enough to shift the atmosphere. Marcus Carter never hesitated. "People are already talking," he finally said. Richard scoffed. "Of course they are. It's a party. People gossip." "No," Daniel cut in sharply, "not just here." That made Richard pause. Daniel pulled his phone out and held it up. "It's online." Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. Richard's face darkened. "What do you mean online?" Daniel tapped the screen and turned it toward him. "A video," he said. "Someone recorded the whole thing. Your speech, Mom's announcement, everything." Evelyn felt a slow, cold realization settle in her chest. Of course, there had been journalists, guests with phones, people hungry for scandal. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "Congratulations, Dad, you're trending." Richard snatched the phone. His eyes scanned the screen, and for the first time that night, his confidence cracked completely. This is ridiculous," he muttered. "It'll die down." "It's not dying down," Daniel said. "It's spreading." He pointed at the screen. "Business pages are already picking it up. Headlines, comments. People are tearing us apart." Marcus added quietly, "They're calling it the biggest social scandal of the year." Richard's grip on the phone tightened. "This will affect the company," Daniel continued. "Investors, partners, everyone will see this." Richard looked up slowly, at Evelyn. And now, there was something new in his eyes. Not just anger, blame. "This is your doing," he said. Evelyn didn't flinch. "No," she replied calmly. "This is the truth." "You exposed us," Marcus snapped. "Do you understand what that means?" "Yes," said Evelyn. "It means you can't hide anymore." Daniel let out a frustrated breath. "This isn't about survival." He turned to him. "Then survive," she said simply. That only made it worse. Marcus paced the room, his frustration boiling over. "This is a disaster," he muttered. "The company's stock could drop. Deals could fall through. We could lose everything." Richard's mind was already racing ahead, calculating, adapting, like always. "Damage control," he said suddenly. Both sons looked at him. "What?" Daniel asked. "We control the narrative," Richard said. "We release a statement, spin it." Marcus frowned. "Spin what? That we've been living a lie for 50 years? Richard's eyes sharpened. "No," he said. "We turn it into something else." Evelyn crossed her arms slightly. Now this was familiar. The strategist, the manipulator. "What exactly are you planning?" she asked. Richard ignored the tone. "We say you're unstable," he said. The words landed like ice. Daniel blinked. "Dad!" "But it makes sense," Richard continued. "An emotional breakdown, 50 years of stress. She made false accusations in public." Marcus stared at him. "You want to say Mom is crazy?" Richard didn't hesitate. "If it protects the business, yes." Silence. Even the air felt heavier now. Richard looked at him, really looked at him, and whatever small piece of doubt might have remained inside her disappeared. "You're unbelievable," Daniel said under his breath. Richard turned to him sharply. "You think I enjoy this? This is survival." "At her expense?" asked Marcus. "At anyone's expense," Richard replied coldly. "That's how this works." Evelyn let out a slow breath. Then she smiled. Not kindly, not bitterly, just knowingly. "You're proving my point," she said. "What point?" Richard asked. "That this family was never real," she said. "It was always just a transaction." Daniel looked away. Marcus didn't argue, because they couldn't. Richard shook his head. "Believe whatever you want, but I'm not letting everything I built collapse because of one emotional outburst." Evelyn straightened slightly. "It wasn't an outburst," she said. "It was the truth."
And truth doesn't matter, Richard shot back. Perception does. Evelyn held his gaze. For you, she said. For me, it ends tonight. That stopped him. For a second. What does that mean? He asked. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked past them, towards the door. Her hand rested on the handle, then she paused. Without turning around, she said, "You have less than an hour now," and opened the door. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. The guests had thinned out. Whispers replaced laughter. Phones replaced champagne glasses. Evelyn stepped forward, and she saw him. Thomas, still there, waiting, not impatient, not anxious, just present, for her. She walked toward him slowly, each step lighter than the last. Behind her, she could hear voices rising again. Richard arguing, her sons panicking, the empire cracking. But in front of her, there was something else, something real. Thomas looked at her, not asking questions, not demanding explanations, just understanding. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Evelyn stopped in front of him. For a moment, she didn't answer, because no one had asked her that in a very long time. "Yes," she said finally, and for the first time, it wasn't a lie. Thomas nodded. "That's good," he said. A simple sentence, but it meant more than everything she had heard that night. Behind them, the storm was growing, the scandal, the collapse, the consequences, and Evelyn knew this was only the beginning.
The whispers in the hallway weren't whispers anymore. They were sharp, hungry, relentless. Phones were out, screens were glowing, names were being typed, searched, dissected. Evelyn could hear fragments as she walked past. 50 years. Not even his kids. Did you see the video? This is insane. She didn't stop, didn't react. For the first time, she wasn't trying to control the narrative. She was letting it burn. Thomas walked beside her, not too close, not too far, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. Behind them, the study door slammed open. "Evelyn!" Richard's voice echoed through the hall, sharp, commanding, desperate. She stopped, slowly turned. Richard was already striding toward her, Daniel and Marcus right behind him. The three of them looked nothing like the composed, powerful family from an hour ago. They looked exposed. "Where do you think you're going?" Richard demanded. Evelyn met his gaze. "Away from this," she said calmly. "You're not going anywhere," he snapped. "Not until we fix this." Evelyn raised her eyebrow slightly. "Fix?" "Yes, fix." Daniel stepped in. "Mom, you don't understand how serious this is." "I understand perfectly," she replied. "No, you don't," Marcus cut in. "This isn't just about you or Dad anymore. This is about everything. Our reputation, our future, our lives," Evelyn corrected. Marcus clenched his jaw. "Call it whatever you want, but we're going to lose everything if we don't act fast." Evelyn looked at him, then at Daniel, then back at Richard. 3 men, all saying the same thing in different ways. "Then act," she said. Richard's patience snapped. "This isn't a negotiation," he barked. "You're going to stand next to me, we're going to address the guests, and you're going to take back what you said." The hallway went silent again. Even the guests nearby stopped pretending not to listen. Evelyn didn't move. "I'm not taking anything back," she said. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mom, please, just say it was a misunderstanding. We'll handle the rest." Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No." Marcus let out a frustrated breath. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "What do you gain from destroying us?" Evelyn's expression didn't change. "Freedom," she said. That word hit harder than anything else. Richard laughed harshly. "Freedom? You think this is freedom? This is suicide." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "For you, maybe." His eyes darkened. "You think you can walk away clean from this? You think people won't come after you too?"
Evelyn's voice stayed calm. Let them. Daniel stared at her like he didn't recognize her anymore. This isn't you. Evelyn held his gaze. No, she agreed. It's not. That's silence again. But this time, it carried something irreversible. Marcus stepped forward, his voice dropping into something colder. If you don't fix this, we will. Evelyn's eyes flicked toward him. How? She asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. We go public, he said. We tell everyone you're lying. Daniel nodded quickly. We say it was a breakdown, that you're not in a stable condition. Evelyn looked between them, her own sons, and felt nothing. No anger, no shock, just clarity. You're willing to destroy me to save yourselves. Marcus didn't even deny it. We're doing what we have to. Evelyn gave a small nod. Then do it, she said. That wasn't the reaction they expected. Daniel blinked. What? Do it, she repeated. Say whatever you want. Marcus frowned. You think we won't? Evelyn's lips curved slightly. I think you won't work, she said. Richard stepped forward, his voice sharp. And why not? Evelyn turned her head slightly, toward the ballroom, where a group of guests stood, frozen, still watching, still recording. Because the truth is already out there, she said, and people saw it with their own eyes. Silence. Again. Daniel looked uncertain now. Marcus, too. For the first time, their confidence cracked. Richard noticed it immediately. Enough, he said, cutting through the hesitation. We're not standing here arguing like amateurs. He turned toward the ballroom. We control this, now. Before anyone could stop him, he walked back inside. Daniel hesitated, then followed. Marcus lingered for a second, looking at Evelyn. There was something in his eyes. Anger, confusion, something deeper. Then he turned and went after them. Evelyn didn't move. Thomas stepped slightly closer. They're not going to stop, he said quietly. I know, Evelyn replied. She watched as the three men disappeared back into the storm. They'll fight, Thomas added. Evelyn nodded. So will I. She took a slow breath, then turned and walked toward the ballroom. Not to join them, not to stand beside them, but to end this. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The music was gone. The celebration was dead. Only tension remained. Richard stood at the center again, microphone in hand, trying to rebuild control. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, forcing a composed tone. I apologize for the confusion earlier. Emotions were running high, and unfortunately, stop. Evelyn's voice cut through the room, clear, unshakable. All heads turned again. Richard froze mid-sentence. Evelyn walked forward slowly, every step echoing, final. You want to fix this? She said. Then let's tell the whole truth. Daniel's heart dropped. Marcus stiffened. Richard's grip on the microphone tightened. What are you doing? He hissed. Evelyn didn't answer him. She looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the people who had built their lives around lies. And she spoke without fear. The room didn't breathe. Not a single glass clinked. Not a single whisper slipped through. Because everyone knew, whatever came next, there was no coming back from it. Evelyn stood in the center of the ballroom, facing a sea of eyes, phones raised, cameras recording, judgment waiting. Richard's voice cut through the silence, low and dangerous. Evelyn, don't. She didn't even look at him. For 50 years, she had listened to that voice, obeyed it, feared it. Tonight, it meant nothing. You want the truth? She said, her voice steady. Then listen carefully. A ripple moved through the crowd. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Marcus clenched his fists. Both of them already knew this would destroy whatever was left. Evelyn took a slow breath. For 50 years, she began, this family has been built on a lie. No hesitation, no softening,
Just truth. Gasps broke out quietly across the room. She continued, I married Richard Carter because I was afraid. The confession hit differently. Not scandal, not drama. Honesty. I was young, she said. I had a choice. Love or security. Her eyes flicked, just for a second, toward Thomas, and I chose security. Thomas didn't move, but something in his expression shifted. Pain. Old. Familiar. Evelyn looked back at the crowd. I told myself I could learn to love him, she said, that I could build something real out of something convenient. She let out a quiet breath. I was wrong. The silence deepened. I stayed, she continued, not because I was happy, but because I was afraid to leave. Richard scoffed. This is pathetic. Quiet, she said. Not loud, not angry, but final. And somehow, he obeyed. Even he didn't understand why. Evelyn's gaze swept across the room. You all admired us, she said. You called it a perfect marriage. A faint, bitter smile touched her lips. There is no such thing as a perfect lie. Daniel looked away. Marcus stared at the floor. Neither of them could meet anyone's eyes anymore. I lied to my children, Evelyn said. That one hurt the most. I let them believe they were part of something strong, something respectable. Her voice didn't break, but something inside it shifted. I let them believe in a father who valued power over people. Richard's jaw tightened. And a mother, she added, who chose silence over truth. That landed on her own shoulders, fully. No excuses, no escape. I created this, she said. The room felt heavier with every word. But tonight, she continued, I'm ending it. She paused, and then she delivered the final truth. Richard Carter is not the father of my sons. The words echoed, loud, clear, permanent. A woman in the crowd gasped loudly. Someone dropped a glass. Phones tilted forward, capturing everything. Evelyn didn't stop. Their real father, she said, is a man who was never invited to sit at this table, but deserves more respect than anyone here. Her gaze shifted again, this time, fully, toward Thomas. All eyes followed, and there he was, standing quietly, not powerful, not polished, but real. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Richard let out a harsh laugh. And this is your grand finale? Dragging a nobody into this circus? Evelyn turned to him. He's more of a man than you've ever been. That broke something. Richard stepped forward. You think this makes you look noble? He demanded. You just admitted you lied to everyone for 50 years. Yes, she said, without hesitation. I did. The simplicity of it destroyed his argument. Daniel ran a hand over his face, his voice shaking. Why? He asked. Why tell this now? Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him. Because you applauded. Silence. Daniel froze. Marcus looked up sharply. You didn't just accept what he did tonight, she continued. You celebrated it. Daniel's throat tightened. Marcus looked away. And suddenly, this wasn't about the past anymore. It was about this moment, this choice. You made it clear, Evelyn said, that you value power more than truth. She paused, and I refuse to be part of that anymore. Richard's voice turned cold. You think anyone here respects you after this? Evelyn looked around, at the faces, the shock, the judgment, the curiosity, and then she said something no one expected. I don't care. That was it. That was the moment everything truly ended. Not the marriage,
Not the lie, the fear. It was gone, completely. Richard stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. "You've lost everything," he said quietly. Evelyn met his gaze. "No," she replied. "I finally stopped losing." The words hung in the air, heavy, unbreakable, and in that moment, the Carter Empire didn't just crack, it collapsed. Behind her, someone began to clap. Slow, measured, unexpected. Evelyn didn't turn, but she knew. Thomas. Then another clap, from somewhere in the crowd, then another. Not loud, not overwhelming, but real. For the first time that night, it wasn't mockery, it wasn't arrogance. It was something else. Respect. Richard looked around, disbelief flooding his face. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to control this, fix it, win. But he wasn't winning anymore. He was losing, and everyone could see it. Evelyn took a final breath, then turned away from the crowd, from the stage, from the lie, and started walking toward the exit. Not running, not hiding, walking, free.
The applause didn't last long. It faded quickly, swallowed by something far more dangerous: silence. Not shocked silence this time, calculated silence, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks. Evelyn had almost reached the doors, almost stepped out of that suffocating room, when she heard it. A slow clap, different from before, mocking, sharp. She stopped, turned. Richard, standing in the center of the ballroom again, clapping. A smile stretched across his face, but it wasn't defeat. It was something worse. "Beautiful," he said, his voice echoing. "Absolutely beautiful." The room tensed again, because this was not a man who had accepted loss. This was a man preparing his next move. Evelyn watched him carefully. She knew that look. She had seen it before, right before he destroyed someone. "You've had your moment, your grand confession, your dramatic exit." He tilted his head slightly. "My turn." Daniel frowned. "Dad, stay out of it," Richard snapped, not even looking at him. Marcus shifted uneasily. Even they could feel it now. This wasn't control. This was escalation. Richard stepped forward slowly. "You think truth wins?" he said, looking directly at Evelyn. "You think honesty fixes everything?" He shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "Power does." A chill ran through the room. Evelyn didn't move. "I built everything you see," Richard continued. "This name, this reputation, this empire." He gestured around the ballroom. "And I'm not letting it burn because of your emotional awakening." Evelyn's voice remained calm. "It's already burning." Richard smiled, cold. "Then I'll rebuild it," he said. "And I'll start by making sure everyone knows exactly who you are." Daniel stiffened. "What does that mean?" Richard finally looked at him. "It means," he said, "we don't let her control the story." Marcus stepped forward. "Dad, this is already out there." "Then we change it," Richard snapped. His voice rose, sharp, commanding. "We release everything." The word hung in the air. Everything. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. "What exactly is everything?" she asked. Richard's smile widened. "All those years you think I didn't notice? All those secrets you thought you buried?" A pause. Heavy. Deliberate. "I kept records, Evelyn." That was new. Even she hadn't expected that. Daniel looked confused. What kind of records? Richard didn't take his eyes off Evelyn. "Her life," he said. "Her mistakes." Marcus frowned. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Richard took another step forward. "Every account," he said. "Every transaction. Every
Interesting decision she made over the years. Evelyn felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear, awareness. You spied on me? She asked. Richard shrugged. I prepared, he corrected. Daniel's voice dropped low. What kind of records? Richard's answer was calm, too calm. The kind that can destroy a reputation. Silence. Marcus looked between them. This is insane. No, this is necessary. Evelyn studied him. You've been waiting for this, she said. Of course I have, he replied. No denial, no shame. You've had your moment, he continued, your grand confession, your dramatic exit. He tilted his head slightly. Now it's my turn. Daniel stepped back slightly. Now even he looked uneasy. What exactly are you going to release? Richard didn't answer him. He kept his eyes on Evelyn. You're not the saint you pretended to be, he said. You want truth? Let's give them all of it. Evelyn took a slow breath. For a second, just a second, the past flickered. Old decisions, old compromises, things she had buried. Not crimes, but not clean either. She had survived, and survival always comes with a cost. Richard saw it, that tiny shift in her expression, and he smiled. There it is, he said softly. You're not so fearless after all. Evelyn looked at him, and then she did something he didn't expect. She smiled back, small, calm, unshaken. Do it, she said. The words landed harder than any resistance. Richard blinked. What? Do it, she repeated. Release whatever you have. Daniel stared at her. Mom, go ahead, she said, her eyes still locked on Richard's. Marcus frowned. You don't even know what he's talking about. I do, Evelyn said quietly. Then she took a step forward, closing the distance between them. And it doesn't change anything. Richard's smile faded slightly. That's where you're wrong, he said. Evelyn shook her head. No, she replied. You are. Silence. Again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was tension, pure, sharp, dangerous. You think exposing my past will destroy me, Evelyn continued. It won't. Richard's eyes narrowed. It'll remind people that I'm human, she said. A pause, and that I survived you. That hit. Deep. Hard. Daniel looked between them, confused. What does that mean? Evelyn didn't look at him. Your father thinks secrets are power, she said. Marcus swallowed. Aren't they? Evelyn shook her head. No, she said. Truth is. Richard let out a cold laugh. You really believe that? Evelyn met his gaze one last time. I don't need people to think I'm perfect, she said. I just need to stop pretending. Silence fell again, but this time it felt different, like something had shifted permanently. Richard studied her face, searching, looking for weakness, for doubt, for anything he could use, but there was nothing there. And for the first time, he hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough, because everyone saw it. Daniel, Marcus, the guests, the staff, the man who never hesitated, just did. Evelyn stepped back, toward the door again. This is your last move, she said quietly. Make it count. And then she turned and walked away. This time, no one stopped her.
The doors closed behind Evelyn. Soft, quiet, but final. Inside the ballroom, everything felt unstable, like the ground itself had shifted. Richard didn't move at first. He just stood there, staring at the door, processing, calculating. Then slowly, a smile returned to his face. Not a normal smile, a dangerous one. She really thinks she won, he murmured. Daniel immediately stepped forward. "Dad, stop this." Richard turned his head slightly. That calm look again, the one that always meant trouble. "You still don't understand, do you?" he said. Marcus frowned. "Understands what?" Richard exhaled slowly. "This isn't about emotions," he said. "It's about control." The word echoed. Control. Daniel shook his head. "There's nothing left to control." That was the trigger. Richard's eyes hardened. "There is always something left," he said quietly. And then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, dialed, put it on speaker. The room went completely silent again. "Sir?" A voice answered instantly. Professional, prepared. Daniel's stomach dropped. He knew that voice. "Release everything," Richard said. No hesitation, no explanation. Marcus stepped forward. "Dad, what are you doing?" Richard didn't even look at him. "All files, all reports, full distribution," he added. A pause. Are you sure?" the voice asked. Richard's gaze flicked toward the door, where Evelyn had disappeared. "Yes," he said coldly. "Make sure it spreads fast." Call ended. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel exploded. "You just started a war." Richard smiled slightly. "No," he corrected. "I just finished it." Outside, the night air hit Evelyn's face. Cold, clean, alive. She stepped onto the terrace again, but this time she wasn't running. She wasn't broken. She was steady. Every breath deeper than the last. Behind her, the noise inside started rising again. Faster, louder, more chaotic. She didn't need to turn. She already knew. "He did it," came a quiet voice. Evelyn didn't flinch. Thomas stood beside her, still calm, still grounded. "Of course he did," she said softly. Thomas studied her face. "No fear?" he asked. Evelyn gave a faint smile. "I've already lived through the worst version of him," she said. "This is just noise." Inside the ballroom, phones started buzzing, one by one, then all at once. Guests checked screens. Expressions changed instantly. Shock, confusion, curiosity. Daniel grabbed a phone from a nearby guest, scrolled, read, and froze. Marcus snatched it from him. His eyes widened. "This is bad." Documents, old records, financial trails, private decisions, moments twisted into accusations. Not lies, but not truth either. A perfectly crafted attack. Richard stood still, watching the chaos unfold. This was his element. "This is how power works," he said calmly. Daniel looked at him like a stranger. "You're destroying her." Richard replied without emotion, "I'm protecting what's mine." Outside, Evelyn's phone vibrated. Again, again, again. She ignored it. Thomas noticed. "You're not even going to check?" "No." "You don't want to know what he released?" Evelyn looked out into the darkness. "I already know," she said. Thomas frowned. "Then why stay calm?" She turned slightly toward him. "Because this time, I'm not reacting." That hit differently. This wasn't weakness. This was control of herself. Suddenly, the terrace doors burst open. Daniel stepped out, breathing fast, eyes shaken. "Mom!" Evelyn turned slowly. Marcus followed behind him. Both of them looked different now. Less arrogant, more uncertain.
Daniel held up his phone. "Is this true?" he asked. Evelyn glanced at it briefly, then nodded. Yes. No defense, no denial. Marcus stepped forward. "Why didn't you tell us?" Evelyn's answer was calm. "You never wanted the truth." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Daniel lowered his phone slowly. For the first time, he had no argument, no sarcasm, no superiority. Just confusion. Marcus whispered, "What happens now?" Evelyn looked at both of them, really looked, and said, "Now you choose." They froze. "Choose what?" Daniel asked. Evelyn's voice sharpened slightly. "The kind of men you want to be." That landed hard. Behind them, Richard appeared in the doorway, watching, confident again, certain this was his victory. But something felt off, because for the first time, his sons weren't standing beside him. They were standing between him and Evelyn. Evelyn stepped back, away from all of them. "I'm done fighting," she said quietly, then added, "but I'm not done living." And with that, she turned and walked away into the night. This time, no one followed. No one stopped her. No one could, because something irreversible had happened. The truth was out. The power had shifted, and the next move was no longer hers.
The night swallowed Evelyn whole. Step by step, she walked away from the mansion, from the noise, from the life that had defined her for 50 years. Behind her, everything she had built, everything she had endured, was collapsing. And for the first time, she didn't turn back. But back at the terrace, no one moved. Not Daniel, not Marcus, not even Richard, because Evelyn's last words still echoed in the air. "Now, you choose." Richard broke the silence first. Cold, controlled. "Don't just stand there," he said. "Go after her." Neither son moved. That was new. Richard's eyes narrowed. "I said, go," he repeated, sharper this time. Daniel finally spoke. "No." The word landed like a slap. Richard blinked. "What?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "We're not going after her." A pause. Heavy. Dangerous. Richard took a step forward. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone shifting. "This world doesn't reward weakness." Daniel shook his head. "Maybe," he said, "but it also doesn't forgive monsters." That hit harder than anything before. Richard's face darkened instantly. "Watch your mouth." Marcus stepped forward now. "No," he said firmly. "You watch yours." Another first. Another line crossed. Inside the ballroom, guests were already leaving, whispers spreading, phones still glowing. The Carter name, once untouchable, now trending for all the wrong reasons. And in the middle of it, Richard stood alone, losing control, piece by piece. "You think walking away from me fixes anything?" Richard snapped. Daniel replied calmly, "No." A pause. "But staying with you destroys everything." That was it. The moment. The final shift. Richard looked between his sons, searching for doubt, for hesitation, for loyalty, but there was none left. Only distance, only realization. Marcus spoke quietly. "What she said about choice?" Daniel finished it. "This is ours." They turned, not toward their father, but toward the exit, the same path Evelyn had taken. "Daniel!" Richard's voice cracked slightly. First time, ever. Daniel stopped, but didn't turn around. "You walk out that door, you're on your own." Silence. Then Daniel answered, "We already are." And he walked. Marcus followed, without hesitation. The terrace doors closed again.
leaving Richard alone. For the first time in his life, no one stood beside him. No wife, no sons, no control. Just silence and the distant echo of everything he had lost. Outside, Daniel and Marcus stepped into the night. They spotted Evelyn ahead, walking down the long driveway, alone, but not weak. Never that again. They exchanged a glance. No words needed. Then, they started walking. Not running, not chasing. Just following. Evelyn heard footsteps behind her. She stopped, slowly turned. Daniel and Marcus stood a few feet away. Not close, not distant. Uncertain. For the first time in their lives. "Why are you here?" she asked calmly. Daniel swallowed. "We don't know," he admitted. Marcus added, "But we didn't want to stay there." Evelyn studied their faces, searching, measuring, not as a mother, but as someone seeing them clearly for the first time. "You chose," she said. Daniel nodded slightly. "Yes." A long pause. Then Evelyn asked the question that mattered most. "Are you ready to live with it?" They looked at each other, then back at her, and for the first time, there was no arrogance in their eyes, no entitlement, just truth. "We'll try," Marcus said quietly. Evelyn held their gaze for a moment longer. Then she turned again and started walking. This time, they walked behind her, not as princes, not as heirs, but as men who had finally made a choice.
The night stretched long and quiet. No headlines yet, no final judgment. Just 3 figures walking down a dark driveway, leaving behind a mansion full of echoes. Evelyn didn't slow down. Daniel and Marcus followed a few steps behind, not speaking, not rushing, because none of them knew what to say. And for once, silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. They reached the gate, the same gate that had once felt like a symbol of power. Now it felt like an exit. Evelyn stopped, rested her hand lightly on the cold metal. For a moment, she just stood there, feeling it, ending it. Then she pushed it open and stepped outside. The road ahead was empty, dark, unknown, and real. Behind them, a car engine roared to life. All 3 turned. Headlights cut through the darkness, fast, aggressive, stopping just a few feet away. The driver's door slammed open. Richard stepped out. But this wasn't the same man. The calm, the control, the calculated arrogance, gone, replaced by something raw, unstable. "You don't just walk away from me," he shouted. His voice echoed into the night. Evelyn didn't move. Daniel stepped slightly forward. "Dad, don't," Richard snapped. His eyes were wild now, locked on Evelyn. "You think this ends here?" he demanded. "You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone and just leave?" Evelyn's voice was calm. Yes. That one word cut deeper than any insult. Richard laughed, but it wasn't controlled anymore. It was desperate. "You've ruined everything," he said. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "No," she replied. "I exposed it." Marcus stepped forward now. "Dad, stop this," he said. "It's over." Richard turned sharply. "You too?" he snapped. "You're siding with her?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm siding with the truth." That word again, truth. It kept coming back, like something none of them could escape anymore. Richard looked between his sons. Something cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. "You ungrateful," he muttered, then louder. "I gave you everything." Daniel stepped forward. "You gave us a name," he said. A pause.
but not a life. That hit hard. Richard staggered slightly, not physically, but emotionally. For the first time, his control was slipping completely. Evelyn watched him, not with anger, not with hate, but with clarity. "You don't know how to exist without control," she said quietly. Richard looked at her like she'd just insulted him. "Control is everything," he shot back. Evelyn shook her head. "No," she said. "It's the only thing you have left." Silence fell again, heavy, unforgiving. Then something unexpected happened. Richard didn't shout, didn't argue, didn't attack. He just stopped. His shoulders dropped slightly, his breathing slowed, and for a brief moment, he looked old, not powerful, not intimidating, just tired. "You really believe this is better?" he asked quietly. Evelyn answered without hesitation, "Yes." Richard looked at his sons. They didn't speak, didn't move, didn't come to him, and in that moment, he understood something. For the first time, he had actually lost. But even then, he wasn't ready to let go. "You'll regret this," he said. It wasn't a threat, not anymore. It sounded like a man trying to convince himself. Evelyn stepped closer, not afraid, not angry, just done. "I already regret staying," she said. A pause. "But I won't regret leaving." That was the final blow. Not loud, not violent, but absolute. Richard stepped back slowly, got into his car, and for a second, it looked like he might say something else, do something else. But he didn't. The engine started, the headlights turned, and just like that, he drove away. Gone. The road fell silent again, only the distant sound of the engine fading into the night. Marcus exhaled slowly. "That's it?" he asked. Evelyn looked ahead. "Yes." Daniel frowned. "It doesn't feel like it." Evelyn nodded slightly. "It will." A long silence followed. Then Marcus spoke again. "What happens now?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately, because this time there was no plan, no structure, no script, just life. "We start over," she said finally. Daniel let out a quiet breath. "From nothing?" Evelyn glanced at him. "From truth." They stood there for a moment longer. Three people, no longer bound by lies, but not yet connected by anything new. That would take time. From the shadows near the gate, a familiar figure stepped forward. Thomas. He had been there the whole time, watching, waiting, not interfering. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. Evelyn gave a small nod. "It is now." Thomas looked at Daniel and Marcus, studied them, not judging, just understanding. "Long road ahead," he said. Evelyn looked out into the darkness. "Yes," she replied. "At least it's real." And for the first time, none of them turned back.
6 months. 182 days. That's how long it took for the Carter Empire to disappear. The mansion was no longer theirs. The grand ballroom, where everything had shattered, now belonged to strangers. The name Carter still existed, but it didn't mean what it used to. Respect had turned into whispers. Power had turned into curiosity. And the story, their story, had spread far beyond the city. Evelyn sat on the wooden porch of a small cottage, far from the noise, far from the past. The air smelled different here. Clean, honest, real. No polished floors, no crystal chandeliers, no pretending. Just wind, trees, and silence that didn't suffocate. She held a cup of tea in her hands, warm, steady. Her fingers traced the faint mark on her ring finger. The skin there still hadn't fully healed. A pale line, 50 years long. Some things don't disappear, they just fade. Life hadn't magically become perfect here. There were no fairy tale endings. The first few weeks were brutal. Silence was loud. Memories were louder. She would wake up at night, reaching for a life that no longer existed, and every time she had to remind herself, it was over. But slowly, something changed. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. Small, fragile, real. The garden outside her cottage had become her escape. She planted things, watered them, watched them grow. It was simple work, but it meant something, unlike everything she had done before. A creaking sound broke the silence. The gate. Evelyn looked up. Thomas. Same old jacket, same quiet presence, a small toolbox in his hand. He never arrived loudly, never demanded attention. He just showed up. Fence was leaning, he said, nodding toward the side. Figured I'd fix it. Evelyn smiled faintly. Of course you did. He got to work immediately. No unnecessary conversation, no pressure, just presence. They had an understanding now. He didn't ask her to rebuild the past, and she didn't rush into something new. They weren't trying to be what they once were. They were just two people who understood each other. Tea? Asked Evelyn after a while. Thomas nodded. Wouldn't say no. They sat together on the porch, not too close, not too far, comfortable in the space between them. Any news? He asked carefully. Evelyn knew what he meant. She nodded slowly. A little. Daniel. He had left the city, tried to start something on his own, a business. No connections, no family name to lean on, just himself. It didn't go well, at least not yet. But for the first time in his life, he was trying, really trying. Marcus stayed behind, got a job, a normal job, no special treatment, no shortcuts. And it hit him hard, the reality of a life without privilege, without protection, without the Carter name opening doors. Haven't they called? Asked Thomas gently. Evelyn shook her head. No. A pause. They won't. Not yet. There was no bitterness in her voice, just acceptance. They're still angry, she added. It's easier to face the truth. Thomas nodded. Give them time. Evelyn looked down at her cup. I already have, she said quietly. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was calm. And him? Asked Thomas after a moment. Evelyn didn't need clarification. Richard. She exhaled slowly. He lost everything, she said. Not dramatically, not with satisfaction, just as a fact. The business collapsed. Investors culled out. Reputation destroyed. No one trusted him anymore after everything became public. He's still fighting, he added. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Of course he is. Evelyn gave a faint smile. He doesn't know how to stop. But she wasn't afraid anymore. That part of her was gone. Thomas finished his tea, set the cup down. You did the right thing, he said. Evelyn looked at him. For a moment, she didn't answer. Did I? She asked quietly. Not doubt, just reflection. Thomas didn't rush his answer. You told the truth, he said. That's always right. Evelyn nodded slowly. Maybe that was enough.
The sun began to set, painting the sky in soft gold and pink. No drama, no chaos, just peace. Thomas stood up. "Bus in 20 minutes," he said. Evelyn smiled slightly. "You always leave early." He shrugged. "Old habit." He hesitated for a second, like he wanted to say something more, but didn't. Instead, he nodded and walked toward the gate. Evelyn watched him go, until he disappeared down the road. She was alone again, but it didn't feel empty. Not anymore. She reached for a book beside her. Old, worn, familiar. Poetry she once loved before she stopped being herself. She opened it, read softly, her own voice filling the quiet space. For the first time in decades, no one interrupted, no one corrected, no one silenced her. She closed the book, took a deep breath. The air smelled like earth and freedom. Life hadn't ended. It had just finally begun.
The knock came just before sunset. Soft, uncertain, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they had the right to be there. Evelyn looked up from her book. For a moment, she didn't move, because something inside her already knew. The knock came again, slightly louder this time. Still hesitant, still human. Evelyn stood, walked to the door slowly, not rushing, not fearing, just aware. When she opened it, they were standing there, Daniel and Marcus. 6 months had changed them. Not completely, but enough. The sharp arrogance, gone. The effortless confidence, cracked. In its place, something unfamiliar, something real. Daniel looked thinner, tired, like life had finally introduced itself properly. Marcus looked older somehow, not in years, but in weight, responsibility, reality. For a moment, no one spoke, because this wasn't a reunion, not yet. "Hi, Mom," Daniel said finally. The word sounded different now, less automatic, more intentional. Evelyn studied their faces, carefully, quietly, then stepped aside. "Come in." They hesitated, just for a second, like entering this house meant something bigger than just crossing a doorway. Then they stepped inside. The cottage was simple, warm, nothing like the mansion they grew up in. No marble, no luxury, just life. Marcus looked around slowly. "This is where you've been living?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "Yes." Daniel exhaled quietly. "It's peaceful." Evelyn gave a faint smile. "It is." They stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, 2 grown men who didn't know how to talk to their own mother. Evelyn didn't rush to fix it, didn't fill the silence. She let it exist, because this time, truth mattered more than comfort. "Why are you here?" she asked finally. Not cold, not warm, just direct. Daniel glanced at Marcus, then back at her. "We tried," he said. Evelyn didn't react. "Failed," Marcus added quietly. A small, bitter laugh escaped him. Turns out, life isn't that easy without a last name. Evelyn held his gaze. "And?" Daniel swallowed. "And we realized something." A pause. "We don't know how to live." That was honest, painfully honest. Evelyn nodded slowly. "That's a start." Marcus frowned slightly. "That's it?" he asked. "No, I told you so, no lecture?" Evelyn shook her head. "You've already lived the lesson," she said. "No need to repeat it." Silence again, but softer this time, less hostile. Daniel took a step forward. "We were angry," he said. Evelyn didn't interrupt.
At you, he added, at him, at everything. Marcus continued quietly, but mostly at ourselves. Evelyn watched them closely, not as their mother, not as a victim, but as someone deciding whether they deserved a place in her life again. "You hated me," she said. Not a question, a fact. Daniel nodded. Yes. No excuses. Evelyn took a breath. "And now?" Marcus answered this time. "We don't understand you yet," he said honestly, "but we don't hate you." That mattered, more than an apology. Daniel looked down briefly, then said, "We came to ask something." Evelyn waited. "Not for money," he added quickly. "Not for help like before." A pause. "We just want a chance." The words hung in the air. Fragile. Real. Evelyn walked past them slowly, to the window, looked outside. The same quiet road, the same open sky. For 50 years, she had given everything, without question, without boundaries, without truth. Now, this was different. "What kind of chance?" she asked without turning. Daniel answered carefully. "To be in your life," he said, "not as who we were, but as who we're trying to become." Marcus added, "We don't expect forgiveness, just time." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. This was the moment she never thought would come, not because they returned, but because they returned differently. She turned back to them, slowly, measured. "If you stay, it won't be the same." They nodded immediately. "We know." "I won't lie for you," she continued. "I won't protect you from consequences. I won't be silent." Daniel met her gaze. "We don't want that anymore." A long pause. Then Evelyn said something that changed everything. "Then you can stay." Relief didn't explode. There was no dramatic hug, no tears, just a quiet shift. A door, not fully open, but no longer closed. Marcus exhaled deeply. Daniel nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. Evelyn gestured toward the kitchen. "Tea?" Daniel almost smiled. "Yeah." As they moved inside, the tension didn't disappear. The past didn't vanish. The pain didn't erase. But something new began. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon. And for the first time, this wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of something honest.
The night felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just quiet. Inside the small cottage, 3 people sat at the table, not as a perfect family, not even as a healed one, but as something far more real. People who had finally stopped pretending. Evelyn poured tea. Daniel and Marcus sat across from her, still unsure, still careful, but present. For the first time in their lives, no one was playing a role. "You'll take the guest room," Evelyn said calmly. Marcus nodded. "Thank you." Daniel hesitated, then said softly, "We don't deserve this." Evelyn looked at him. "You don't earn a place in someone's life in one day," she replied. "You prove it over time." No anger, no softness, just truth, and they accepted it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, until headlights cut through the darkness outside. A car, stopping, right in front of the house. Evelyn didn't move, but her eyes sharpened, because she already knew. The door opened before the knock even came. Richard stood there. But this wasn't the man from the mansion, not the untouchable figure, not the arrogant king. This man looked smaller, older, broken in a way pride couldn't hide anymore. Daniel stood up instantly. Marcus followed.
Tension snapped back into the room. "What are you doing here?" Marcus asked sharply. Richard ignored him. His eyes were locked on Evelyn. "We need to talk," he said. Same words, different man. Evelyn stepped forward. "No," she said calmly. That stopped him. "You don't get to walk into my life anymore and decide that," she added. For a second, the old Richard almost came back. The anger, the control. But it faded just as quickly. "I lost everything," he said. No pride, no performance, just a statement. Evelyn didn't react. "I know. The business, gone. My reputation, gone. That house." He stopped, because even he knew it was never his. Silence stretched between them. Daniel spoke this time. "Why are you here?" Richard finally looked at his sons, really looked, and for the first time, there was no authority in his eyes. "I thought," he started, then stopped, because the truth was harder to say than he expected. "I thought you'd come with me," he admitted. Marcus let out a short, bitter laugh. "Why would we?" Richard didn't answer immediately, because he didn't have one. Years ago, that question wouldn't exist. They would have followed him without thinking. Now, they were standing on the other side. "You taught us everything," Daniel said quietly. Richard looked at him. Something flickered. Hope? Daniel continued. "And that's the problem." That hit harder than any insult. "You taught us power matters more than people. You taught us respect comes from fear. You taught us to look down on anything real." Marcus stepped closer. "And now, look at you." Silence. Heavy. Final. Richard's shoulders dropped slightly, not in defeat, but in realization. Evelyn watched it all quietly. For 50 years, this man controlled everything, and now he couldn't control this moment. "I didn't come to fight," he said finally. He looked at Evelyn again. "I don't know what to do." That was the most honest thing he had ever said. Evelyn walked closer, slowly. For a moment, it almost felt like the past might return, like she might soften, but she didn't. "You live with it," she said. Richard frowned. "With what?" Evelyn's voice didn't shake. "With the life you built, with the choices you made, with the people you destroyed." Each word landed. Clean, precise, final. "You don't run from it anymore." Silence. Richard looked at her, searching for something. Forgiveness, comfort, anything. But there was none. Only truth. After a long moment, he nodded, barely. Then he turned, walked back to his car. No shouting, no drama, no last attempt. Just a man, finally facing himself. The engine started. The headlights disappeared. And just like that, he was gone. For good. Inside the house, no one spoke for a while, because they all understood something had ended completely. Evelyn walked back inside, sat down, calm. Daniel looked at her. "You didn't even hesitate," he said. Evelyn met his gaze. "I already said everything I needed to say," she replied. Marcus nodded slowly. "He deserved that." Evelyn shook her head. "No." They both looked confused. It wasn't about what he deserved. It was about what I deserved. That stayed in the air, and for the first time, they understood her. Not as their mother, not as a victim, but as a person. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden transformations. No perfect healing. Just small things. Breakfast together, conversations, arguments, Silences. Learning. Daniel got a job, a real one, started from the bottom. Marcus did the same. No shortcuts, no last name, just effort. And slowly, respect started to mean something different. One evening, Evelyn sat on the porch again, tea in her hands, sunset in front of her. Thomas stood by the fence, fixing something again, as always. She watched him for a moment, then said, "You don't have to keep fixing things." He looked up, smiled slightly. "I know. I just want to." Evelyn nodded. This time, she stood up, walked toward him, and instead of stopping at a distance, she stood beside him, not leaning, not depending, just choosing. They didn't say anything, because some things don't need words. Behind them, inside the house, her sons were talking, arguing about something small, normal, human. Evelyn looked at the horizon, the sky glowing gold. 50 years behind her, a lifetime ahead, no matter how short. She wasn't a wife anymore, wasn't a shadow, wasn't a lie. She was herself. And for the first time in her life, that was enough.